Welcome to Papa's Workshop. You know, how many of you have a regular maintenance schedule for your XCarve? I've read so many different things on the forum that there is just a lot of problems that people have had, and I think a lot of that may be due to maintenance. Now, I've had my XCarve for over 3 years now, and I've had virtually no problem with it at all, and I do contribute a lot of that to regular maintenance. There's a schedule that I follow after each time that I use it, before I start it, and on a monthly and literally 100-hour inspection. So I want to show you what I do to maintain my XCarve today and to be able to keep it operating trouble-free. So let's get started. I guess the first question you got to ask, if you do have a maintenance schedule, is it written down or is it just something that you keep up here? Well, mine's actually written down, and I have a schedule on exactly what I do. And the first thing, we're going to start with, after you carve something and the project is finished, what do you do? Well, from my standpoint, I'm going to take and inspect this machine from top to bottom, and I'm going to clean it. I want to make sure that this machine is clean, and while I'm cleaning it, I can actually check to see if anything is broken, damaged, loose, that type of thing, because that will help prevent a problem. I've had a lot of people ask, how do I keep my machine so clean, and how does it look still brand new after 3 years of use? Well, this is a big part of it right here, is regular cleaning and regular maintenance. Now, as I go through this process with you in today's video, there's going to be a lot of different areas repeated, but to me that's very important to be able to make sure that everything works all the time as it should. Now, after I vacuum this, there are still some places that just don't get clean because the vacuum cleaner can't reach them. So for those areas, I go ahead and connect my air compressor and I'll blow it off and clean it that way, and that still will remove all of the sawdust. While I was blowing off the XCarve, I was also starting to look for anything that might be out of position. So I'm looking for those V-wheels, I'm looking at the belts, but I'm not totally inspecting it. Now that I've got the machine clean, it's time to dive into it a little bit deeper. And let's look for the V-wheels, the belts themselves, and the wiring. Let's make sure that all of that is as it should be. Now, if you look at the track on mine, you see that it's nice and clean all the way where these V-wheels run. But I will left this right here for you. This is a buildup of the sawdust that actually sticks to that slide, and you want to be able to remove that. So now, all the way down, mine is clean. And you have one underneath also, and you want to do the same thing. Make sure that it's clean all the way and visually inspect that. One of the big potential problems is all the wiring back here. Your off and on switch is way down at the bottom, and it would be very easy to bump and knock these wires out. So you just want to make sure after each use and when you turn the machine off that you haven't bumped any of the wires and that there's no wires coming out or they're loose. As far as my checklist that I use on after each use, I have cleaned the entire CNC machine and I vacuum and blow off any excess sawdust. I want it all gone. And then I visually inspect for loose wires, frayed belts, and any loose screws. Most of that is accomplished just by vacuuming and getting everything cleaned up. And that's really all I do after each time that I use the XCarve. Now then, when I come back and get ready to start using it the next time, let's go through that checklist. Now, before I start the machine, I use a checklist as well, just to make sure that I don't miss anything. And on that, first thing is make sure that the machine is clean. because I have two CNC machines side by side, and one could certainly blow a lot of sawdust over into the XCarve, and that could potentially cause some problems. So again, I want to make sure that this machine is clean. So I'll vacuum it, dust it off, make sure that it's clean, ready to be used. That's the first step. And then again, I'm going to visually inspect the machine to make sure that there's no loose wires, that there's no frayed belts, no loose screws. I want to make sure that the wasteboard is clean too. Now, if you have sawdust or debris on this wasteboard, that potentially could cause a lot of problem. When you set your workpiece down on here, it's not going to be level. And then the last thing that I want to do is go ahead and secure the workpiece to the wasteboard. That way that I know that it's in place and it's secure, and I'm not going to tell you what method to use. And I'm not going to tell you how to clamp your material down, because that's a personal choice. Because in my videos that I have shown, I do all different types of methods. One of the methods that I like, of course, is the glue and tape method. Using the CA glue has worked fantastic for me with the painter's tape. Often I will actually use the clamps as well as screwing the project directly to the wasteboard. But that's a personal preference, and I'll let you decide that. Now, before I start the machine, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make sure that everything is clean. Okay, I'm going to visually inspect the CNC machine to make sure that there's no loose wires. It's funny how things will happen, and when you stop it and then you come back later to start the machine again, it's a mystery as to how wires can come loose, and that can certainly cause a problem. So I double check that again to make sure that there's no loose wires. Double check to see if I missed any frayed belts, because I do not want a belt to break in the middle of a project. And of course, I'm going to just look over the machine to make sure that I have no loose screws anywhere. And again, double check the wasteboard, make sure that it's clean. Okay, now that I have the project secured and the machine's on and I'm ready to test it out, do you jog the machine around to make sure that it's moving in the right direction? Well, I think you should. You have the jog controls on there. Go ahead and move right and left, backwards and forwards along the XY axis to make sure that everything's moving in the correct direction. Also, just think about this. If one of your wires is loose on your Y-axis, that machine's not going to go square. It's going to try to go in a really strange direction. So you want to make sure that it's all going in the right direction and it's going straight. And I would also do the same thing with the Z-axis. Move it up, move it down just a little bit to make sure that it's moving in the right direction. The other thing that I have on my checklist is I make sure that I listen to the machine. Let it tell me what's going on too. I'm looking for any kind of strange noise that's not normally there. So if I hear any type of grinding noise or noise that I'm not used to, it's time to investigate before doing a project. Because I can't think of any worst way to ruin a project and possibly damage the machine is to have some type of a grinding noise or anything that doesn't sound normal. So that takes care of my setup before I start. Now, on a monthly basis, I also inspect the machine. And if I do these checks after each and every time, the monthly check becomes quite easy and quite routine. And don't forget, I've got one more check. I also inspect the machine very thoroughly at 100 hours. So how do I know that it's 100 hours? Well, I keep a log. That log tells me how long that I've been running this router, because I know that the brushes are going to last between about 150, maybe 200 hours. And I like to have that 100-hour check just to be able to check on the brushes as well. I also want to be able to check out the machine pretty thoroughly at this stage of the game on a monthly basis. And let me show you what I mean on that. Now, on a monthly basis, I'm also going to check those V-wheels for the tension as well as clean them. And I'm also going to look for the cracks and broken wheels, because those can get damaged over time and they can just simply wear out and would have to be replaced. And the same thing with the belts. I want to just check the tension, and I'm just going to just listen to the tension on it right now and see how it is. Make sure that it's not loose. And then same thing, cracks, broken, teeth broken off. That's what I'm looking for just on a monthly basis. This should not take long because I'm doing basically the same thing after each and every time that I use it. The 100-hour check, however, that is where I want to go into a lot of detail and show you exactly what I'm doing at the 100-hour check. Now, one of the first things that I'm going to do is check all of the screws everywhere, all the nuts, screws throughout this whole entire machine. If I find any loose, I'm going to use the threaded Loctite. Now, this is the blue. You want to use the blue because that means you can actually loosen it at some point. If you use the red version of this, it pretty much locks it permanently, and I don't know that I want to do that to mine. So I use the Loctite blue on anything that happens to come loose, and I know that that's going to keep it secure, even though I still check it every 100 hours. Now, the next thing that I do, I'll just turn the belt over, and I will look at the teeth all along the entire belt. And I want to make sure that there are no teeth missing. And I'll move the gantry out of the way, and I'll inspect the belt all the way as the full length on all the axes, the X and the Y axis, to make sure that there's no teeth that are broken. Now, these belts are about 3 years old, and I want to make sure that they're not dry rotten. So I want to be able to look and make sure that there's no cracks or any type of damage to these belts. Down here at the end, where the belt bends and loops through and goes through this clip, again, I want to make sure, because there's a lot of tension there, I want to make sure that there's no fraying where that belt could potentially break. One of the big problems that I have heard about along a lot of people on the forum is that this belt does not ride in the center of this sprocket, and that's very important because if it's rubbing up against the side on either side, it's going to wear this belt out prematurely on these edges. So you want to make sure that this belt is riding in between the area so that it doesn't cause the excess wear. Now, the next thing I want to do is clean all the V-wheels. And all I do is just use a toothbrush to do that. I will clean it. I'll clean each one of them. And these little belt guides, I'll clean also. And then I'll move it forward just a little bit to expose the rest. And then I'll clean it in. Now, this is a very soft bristled brush. Then I'll move it a little bit more. And then that will finish it up. And this section's done. Now, of course, I have the V-wheels down here at the bottom, on the front and the back. And I have another V-wheel over here that you can't see in the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and clean all of those. I'm also going to move to the other side and do the same thing. But how do you know as far as the tension? If I move this, that is just turning just right. This one is doing the same thing. Now I want to show you this one over here. Now this one, as I turn it, it is moving and nothing else is moving. There's a little bit of tension on it, but not a lot of tension. So this one has to be adjusted. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and clean this one. And I'm going to show you how to adjust it. There we go. That wheel is clean now. And you can see as I move this, the axis, that it does roll. Now then, let's go ahead and adjust this. Okay, now this is a 8mm wrench, and I'm going to put that right in here. And this one is a 3mm, and I'm going to loosen this just a little bit, and then I can turn this to tighten it. I'll tighten that back, and that's literally all that was necessary to be able to do. So now you can see it moving, and now I can just barely move that wheel. So that's all that it took. And I'll just tighten that back. Double check, that's fine. And I'll check the rest of the wheels the same way. So far, on my 100-hour check, I've cleaned the entire machine, vacuumed, blown off all the dust off of it, visually did my inspection, made sure that there was no loose wires, frayed belts, loose screws, all those types of things. And I've gone into detail with the V-wheels and adjusted tension on them. I'm looking for cracks and worn V-wheels to make sure that everything is fine there. And I've shown you how to be able to adjust the tension on the V-wheels. Now I want to move to the belts themselves. There is tons of discussion as far as how tight those belts should be and how do you adjust them. Well, I take a little bit different philosophy on this because the typical norm is that people will tighten their belts around 3.5 to 4.5 pounds. I do not do that. The tension on my belt is actually less than that. I keep the tension on my belt actually at about 2 pounds, and it's worked flawlessly for me. Now I use the fish scale right here, and I'll just hook the belt onto this and then raise it up. You want to raise this up 1 inch. Now to be able to check the tension on this, I move the gantry all the way to the back. Now I also have this little gauge right here. Now I use this on my laser to be able to set the Z-axis, and that's 1/8 of an inch thick. Well, when I made this, I also made this where it's 1 inch wide. And that works perfect. When I put this at my 1 inch, I know exactly how high to be able to hook on to this and pull it up. So when I pull this up, I can slip this under, and I can see that I'm about 2.5 pounds. And that's great for me. And again, I'm not telling you that that's what you should do on your machine, but I have mine set at 2.5 pounds. And I'm gonna go over and check the other side too. So I move the Z-axis all the way over to the right. Then I'm gonna come back over here to the center, and I'm gonna hook the scale onto this and lift this up until I can slide my 1 inch in there. And that is set at right at my 2.5 pounds again, and that's perfect. Again, that's what I set for my machine. You can set yours for whatever you feel is best for yours. The next thing I want to do is make sure that this is good and square. And I'll put that up here, double check it along my wasteboard and along here, and that is perfect. And then I want to check going in this direction, and you can see that that is perfectly square to my wasteboard and along this line. So now that I've checked that, there's no adjustment that would be needed. The last thing that I want to be able to do is make sure that I'm still square. Now I don't use tape measures, I use 2 sticks. But to me that is far more accurate than trying to use a tape measure. And all I do is I slip that in there and get it right over to the corner. Once I have those in place, all I need to do is mark a line. And then from there, I can change directions and go in this direction. put that right back into position. Now that I have that in position, I can mark my line again, and I should have one line. And if you look at that, I do. So this machine is perfectly square. Now someone asked me, should they put a stick in here and screw it down to be able to keep this from moving? I say no, because if this is moving, then that means these screws are loose and it needs to be tightened and then recalibrated. Now the last thing that needs to be discussed is the router itself. We need to make sure that the brushes are still in good shape. Now I'm not going to take this apart today because I have a whole video that I've done where I've shown exactly how to remove this cover and inspect the brushes and replace it. And I'll put a link in the description below to be able to have you go and take a look at that video. A well-maintained XCarve is a trouble-free XCarve. So I hope today that you are able to learn exactly how to do the maintenance on the XCarve to be able to keep it running trouble-free. I want to thank everyone for watching today, and I want to thank also all of my patrons that help support this channel. Again, thank you for watching.